So the first question here is the right institutional design ensures that post-retirement appointments do not create perverse incentives in judicial decision making. So it's a right institutional design we are focusing at that will ensure that post-retirement appointments do not create perverse incentives in judicial decision making. So this perspective is in news because we know that CJ Ranjan Gogoi was appointed to Rajya Sabha. Questions being raised of separation of powers and such things. So the question is asking about the post-retirement appointments in general. So briefly introduced by writing about post-retirement appointments of judges and bringing about its implications. To discuss how the measures towards right institutional design may fix these problems and conclude the answer accordingly. So judges are appointed to various quasi-judicial bodies, such as tribunals, as we know, and government positions also post-retirement. Maybe such as NHRC, as we know, has a criteria for judge, maybe retired chief justice or even a judge, NGT, Rajya Sabha, MP, a governor, etc. So these are not barred in the constitution. So constitution done. So just lay down the constitutional position for everything. This will help get some clarity on the topic. So here they're not barred in the constitution. So a report by VD Center for Legal Policy has pointed out that as many as 70 out of 100 judges retired from the Supreme Court have taken up assignments in many tribunals and commissions. This we know the reality that 170 judges from the out of 100 have taken assignments. This is the thing. So what we're trying to say here is about we know the constitutional position that there is no bar on judges, and then Vidhi Legal Center recently has pointed out that as many as 70 out of 100 judges retired from Supreme Court have taken up assignments in many tribunals and commissions. So this is a known reality of how the proceedings are taking place, and however these appointments raise questions on integrity of the judges. Always speculations arise, of the integrity of the judges, as many perceive such appointments act as the incentives. So these appointments act as incentive for the judges to decide the case in favor of the state. So this is a general argument that there can be a quid pro quo in the form of future appointments. So this undermines judicial independence. So that's the first thing we should talk about: independence of judiciary. It erodes the public trust. When the judiciary's independence is uh, eroded or compromised, it erodes the public trust and it violates ultimately the basic structure of the constitution in the words of Supreme Court itself. And the separation of power as envisaged in the constitution. But we cannot say the separation of power is envisaged in the constitution. Our constitution talks about separation of power as well as a mechanism of checks and balances also. So therefore, there is a need to adapt a right institutional design to prevent perverse incentives in judicial decision making. Since the presence of judges, can also we must see in the light of their experience, their vast legal knowledge, ultimately because Parliament is a lawmaking body in one sense. Take if you take the example of Ranjan Gogoi, so various institutions, some measures can be taken to preserve the judicial impartiality and independence. Talking about something is about introduction of a mandatory cooling off period. So this we can generally talk about that a minimum cooling off period of 2 years, which is post retirement, will eliminate the possibility of suspicion. If this is done on a blanket approach, not eliminate the possibility of suspicion of a conflict of interest or a quid pro quo between the government and the judges. So this is the first thing. And we can also think about increasing the retirement age of judges because, unlike in many countries, a judge in the higher judiciary retires at a comparatively younger age. As we know, in Supreme Court of USA, a judge never retires, so he holds the position till death and is capable of many more years of productive work. There's a general notion that since they retire at 62 or 65, thus the retirement age may be increased to the utilize their expertise in the institution of judiciary itself. So this is one advantage which we can reap, and then clearly delineating the appointment process. So if the appointment process is not vague and have a system in place, a law can be enacted. So to set up a commission made up of a majority, not exclusively of retired judges, to make appointments of competent retired judges to tribunals and judicial bodies post retirement can be one way out. So, delinking judicial verdicts from future job prospects. So it can be done by making appointment to various bodies and posts mechanical. So no, not giving discretion can be a way, because if it is made mechanical based on retirement dates, that is the date of retirement, and judge subject matter. So based on such things, uh, it can be made more mechanical, and the question of integrity of judges don't arise. And then increasing the pension, judges can be compensated by giving their last drawn salary as pension. Is one aspect. This will help reduce the attraction of a post-retirement job. So extending the application of other statutes to judges, like Section 8 of Lokpal and Lokayukta Act, which bar its chairman and members from re-employment or taking up any assignments as a diplomat, governor, as a post, should be extended to ex-judges of Supreme Court and High Court. So as we know that in the Lokpal, Section 8 of the Lokpal Lokayukta Act, it barred its chairman and members from re-employment or taking up any assignment. So that same can be um, emulated even in the judiciary also. So independence of judiciary forms part of basic structure of the constitution, as we know. Further, being a guardian of the constitution, which is the judiciary. So judiciary's role, we must see, it's a guardian of the constitution. Judiciary needs to be insulated from the pressures and inducements. Functioning of judiciary without any bias, favoritism, and appeasement is a must for maintaining tenets of democracy in India. So judiciary has to be, independent. It must function without any bias, favoritism, or appeasement. It's a must for maintaining the tenets of democracy in India. So next question is on the doctrine of neutrality. Explain its significance for constitutional offices in Indian context. So, for example, consider the doctrine of neutrality ensures that maintenance of an attitude of impartiality towards the belligerents, keeping oneself clear of political activity, preserving objectivity in the matters of policies and decisions, not to become involved in their conflict. So, this is about doctrine of neutrality. It ensures the maintenance of an attitude of impartiality towards belligerents, keeping oneself clear of political activity, preserving objectivity in a matter of policies and decisions, and not to become involved in their conflict. It is also known as political neutrality in common parlance. So, doctrine of neutrality is also called as political neutrality. Though through its various judgments, Supreme Court has highlighted the need for authorities like the Speaker or Governor to be faithful to the doctrines of neutrality. So they must be faithful to the doctrines of neutrality and not vacillate under prevailing political pressures, and thus maintain political neutrality. So this is the concept, the idea in general about topic of political neutrality, and they must not budge under political pressure. So moving forward, the significance, that's the part of the question, second part. Explain its significance of doctrine of neutrality. So first is talk with respect to the constitution. It upholds the constitutional trust. The constitutional trust has been vested in several offices. For example, be it speaker, governor, election commissioner, CAG, etc. So which are required to be in line with the sacred conventions of political neutrality and fairness. So this is one part, and then upholding federalism. So in India, balance of power is tilted towards the union. So as we see, because we have a quasi-federal structure, constitutional link between center and states, such as the governor, must play a neutral role. So to safeguard the federal structure and maintain effective communication between the center and state. This is one part about federalism, about the constitution. Then talk about the continuity in governance and keeping a check on executive. So talk about keeping a check on the executive. Constitutional posts such as speaker and governors acting independently on each other can navigate or destroy, uh, can navigate the destiny of state governments. As we can see, because of the governance role for president's rule, imposing president's rule, etc. So that part is also there, state governments, and then as the figurehead who ensures continuance of governance in the state, even in times of constitutional crisis, the governance role is often that of a neutral arbiter. So Neutral arbiter in disputes settled informally within the various strata of the government and is a conscience keeper of the community. So this is the role of governor as such, keeping check on the executive, that role, and then strengthening democracy by ensuring free elections. Elections are pivotal to the quality of a country's governance and can either advance or set back a country's long-term democratic development. So this is elections, free and fair elections, because of setting in democracy. Therefore, election commission's neutrality is of utmost importance and value. So picking up few examples, and then the last one is about financial propriety. The the independence, powers, and responsibilities of the constitutional officers, like the CAG's place high demand. So they place a high ethical demand on the auditors and staff he employs, engages for auditing and accounting work. The general standards for CAG include independence from the legislature, from the executive, so that he cannot any economic misconduct by the government, such as siphoning of the public exchequer, can be pointed out. So the principle of political neutrality is an extension of the traditional principles of liberalism, liberal principles of toleration, independence of opinion, political neutrality, etc. So political neutrality casts duties not only on the constitutional officers but also on the government of the day. So then political leaders must protect any independent constitutional officers from political interference and must not involve them in the political activities or debates. So this is about one perspective on the principle of neutrality, doctrine of neutrality, which was already asked. The significance of that, in terms of maintaining the constitutional trust, upholding federalism, having continuity in governance, and strengthening the democracy by free and fair elections, and also aspect of financial propriety. So, principle of is an extension of liberal principles of toleration, independence of opinion, political neutrality. It casts duty. It's a duty, maintaining such a foundational value on civil services. Must protect independent constitutional officers. One must involve them in political activities or debates. So continuing with the next one, it's on pressure groups. So pressure groups are seen to play a constructive, positive role in deepening the democracy and enhancing our liberties, but they have also been criticized on many counts discussed. So there are two parts. First is talking about the positive, constructive role in deepening the democracy, and next is enhancing our liberties, but they have also been criticized on many counts. So discuss. So coming to the core demand, just introduce about pressure groups, one words, and then hit there to the point about the positive role they play, negative role they play, and elucidation on this, and then conclusion. So a pressure group is an interest group. As we know, it's an interest group organized to promote the interests of. So as you know, it's a group ultimately. So they have certain interest, promotion of interest of their members of the group, and these groups will try to influence the policies of ultimately the government without seeking exercise of formal powers of the government. So this is the perspective we must remember about the pressure groups, that without seeking to exercise the formal powers of the government, so they try to influence the government. This is one perspective, and then they perform a key role in deepening the democracy and increasing the choices for the citizens. This is one angle. So from here, the idea is in the form of must lay down touching the aspects of deepening the democracy. So democracy deepening, when we talk about, we say participative democracy. So we say that participative democracy, they keep the government in touch with the public opinion, provide representation to a wide range of divisive interests and opinions. For example, India against the corruption made the government aware of rising resentment against the corruption in public life. This was one thing, and then upholding the interests of minorities. So, when talking about upholding the interests of minorities, democracy, even the weakest should have the power. That is one view of democracy. You see, so pressure groups give political voice to all kinds of minority groups. So pressure groups, as we discussed, so they give voice to the voiceless, to all kinds of minority groups, and increase their power to negotiate with the states. So ultimately, they're trying to influence the state. For example, the NAS Foundation's advocacy of rights of the LGBT community. So this is one typical example of how an NGO NAS Foundation did advocacy for the LGBT community. And then we have grievance redressal mechanism. So when we talk about grievance redressal mechanism, they provide alternative platforms to citizens to redress grievances and hold the government responsible. For example, the Hind Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan contributed to the passage of the RTI Act. So this is about the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, and then influencing the government decisions. Working workers organizations, employees associations, and most of the movement groups often resort to strikes. So this aspect we must remember that workers organizations, employees associations, and most of the movement groups often resort to strikes in order to force the government to take note of their demands. For instance, government of India's withdrawal from the RCEP was mainly due to the protest by the farmers groups such as Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh and other trade unions. So this is how they influence. When we talk about influence, give an example of the recent instance of RCEP, where they successfully influenced the government in withdrawing from the RCEP. So, and then provide technical inputs for policy formulation. So, business groups are often employ professional lobbyists and send their experts to participate in official bodies and committees to offer advice to government. So, in India, for example, FICCI, from the industry perspective, also CHAM. However, pressure groups have also been criticized. Now, come to the second part. In the first part, we talk about positives. We talk about participative democracy. We talk about giving voice to the minorities, voice to the voiceless. We talk about grievance redressal mechanism, Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, talk about influencing government decisions, etc., and provides technical input for policy formulation. So this is largely the idea about thing. And then pressure groups have also been criticized on account of their interference with functioning of the state. So then come to criticism part that they assert the interests of influential minorities. So, no, not all are so influential, such as trade unions, business groups may represent a powerful minority force in society and they exert their political influence. This might be detrimental to the majority. Also, against the public interest, few interest groups use techniques. So their techniques might hamper the overall public order well being. It may be such as strikes, demonstrations, blockades, picketing. So they cause hardships to the community in general. This is a method, the method which they adopt. So this goes against public interest. And then they're not accountable. As we see, there's no accountability for these groups. Pressure groups, unlike any other political organizations or political parties, you cannot hold them accountable because they don't hold any such official power or such so that you can go and question them. We ultimately question the government or the political parties, but we can never question the pressure groups. They act from behind, cannot be held accountable, which sometimes leads to them exploiting the powers and acting illegally and promoting civil disobedience. This is one aspect of accountability which comes in. So as we see, try to connect to the transparency, accountability, always transparency, accountability, whether they're transparent or accountable, and then undemocratic internal functioning. So leaders are very rarely elected by their members. So as we know, just like political parties, even political parties, in their election are not undemocratic. So even pressure groups also, they function in a very undemocratic way. So they might become influential. They might become influential and unrepresentative of the whole group. They might become influential and unrepresentative of the whole group, and may try to exert their personal interest and agendas. So as we know, this is one aspect of their influence where they exert their own interest. And despite their shortcomings, so despite all these shortcomings, pressure groups form an indispensable component of the modern democracies. They exist. Their presence itself shows that democracy is functioning. So they provide a means through which ordinary citizens who is out of the power sphere, be it political parties or or within the other mechanism, power mechanisms, provide a means in which ordinary citizen can participate in decision-making process. That's about democracy. It's all about consultation, consensus, as well as maintaining a check on government activities. So similarly, governments can be better informed of the electorate's sensitivities to policies because of the pressures articulated by these groups. So these are the points about uh, pressure groups, both positive and negative. Positive, we saw how they enhance and participatory democracy, giving voice to minorities, upholding their interests, grievance redressal mechanisms such as RTI, and then how they influence the government policies ultimately. And they also provide act as inputs for policy making, which are crucial in the current context. But coming to the negative side, the same negative has a can act as a double-edged sword. So they go against public interest in terms of strikes. They assert the influence of minorities, not accountable for, unlike the political parties, are not accountable, we can say, and then they function in a very undemocratic manner. So that is also one criticism of them. So despite all these shortcomings, we say that they help in participating, strengthening democracy because of participation, maintaining a check on government activity. So governments can be better informed of the electorate sensitivities to policies because of the pressures articulated by these groups. So this was about pressure groups.